Hi guys, welcome back to Get Your Popcorn. I am recording this a few weeks in advance. I just watched the movie The Fablemans, which is what we'll be doing today. I am banking a few because I've got some upcoming stuff in September, so I'm banking a bunch of episodes. So if there's something that happened in world news that I am not commenting on, it's because it hasn't happened yet. So just FYI. There are still the links in my Instagram profile if you're interested in donating to the Red Cross for both humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza as well as Ukraine. That's available. It's not like affiliated through me. I just have the links directly to their website. Yeah, so if that's something that you're financially able to do and it's something you're wanting to do, there's links there. I actually had not seen this before. It came out in 2022. I had just had my baby in 2022, and I kind of went through this period of about a year where I actually did not consume film very much. It was my brain could not handle any more information. So yeah, this has been on my watch list for forever, and it actually broke my top 4 for Letterboxd. This film is amazing. It hit on so many levels for me. Number one, this film is a love letter to cinema and the creation of cinema, at least on a personal level for Steven Spielberg. If you don't know, this is his dramatized version of his family story and his story of how he became a filmmaker. And it hits pretty close to home for me in a number of ways. Being that film for me has always been something I lean on when I'm going through a really hard time. My way of connecting with the world. I've been a pretty lonely person, I think, throughout my life, feeling quite isolated from my peer group as a kid. Part of that was me just being kind of weird and different and not connecting, and growing up in a very small town when you are a creative person is sometimes really, really hard. And then as you get to be an adult, a lot of the people that do love creative things move out into bigger cities to go and pursue that. So then you're like increasingly more isolated. And then through my adult life, I haven't like found a lot of connection with people on this level. Yeah, so it leaves me pretty lonely sometimes. It's been pretty great doing this because I've connected with some really like cool other content creators so I can discuss film. But yeah, it hit really close to home, this like feeling of like otherment and being lonely that's discussed through this, and then film being an avenue to sort of explore that with and find connection. This film obviously talks about Steven Spielberg's parents, his family dynamics, and their eventual divorce, which I think if you're a child of divorce hits pretty hard. I mean, obviously, given everything that's happening in the world in retrospect, like my parents' divorce is so very minimal, but I think it happened at a time just as I was coming into being a teenager, and it had similar dynamics to what's happening here. And I won't go too far into that because it's not my story to tell. That's for my parents. But yeah, it like hit me like a ton of bricks, this film. I bawled through this movie. So I know I'm gonna cry now. Oh my God. We haven't even started talking about it. Holy shit. I haven't cried on an episode in like almost 6 months, guys. Jesus. I don't think I've cried since we did It's a Wonderful Life. This film, the impact of this on me was like, I can't even describe it. Like, holy fuck. It was so strong, and I felt so connected, and I felt like weirdly seen watching this movie, and understood, which I think is like, I don't know. I'm assuming that was the point, or at least the point of Steven Spielberg wanting an audience to understand him, and in that made others feel seen. I felt like so understood watching this film. So Spielberg had been considering doing this movie for a long time, wanting to do something more personal. In 1999, his sister, who is a screenwriter, did a draft for it called I'll Be Home, where he was really concerned about how his parents would feel. And so he just kind of kicked around the idea, but didn't really do anything, despite the fact that his parents were like, yeah, you should make a movie about the family. So jump forward a few years, he was making Munich. Tony Kushner is the screenwriter on that film, as well as like a number of films that Spielberg has done. He also was the screenwriter for Lincoln and a few other things. And he really, after hearing Steven Spielberg's life story, really pushed him to do that. His father then died in 2020, and his mom in 2017. And then a first initial draft of The Fablemans was written in 2019. Along with Spielberg's memories, his sisters also contributed their own memories just to round out the story a little bit. So I'm going to read some quotes from Spielberg that he did from an interview, just because I think it kind of encapsulates a lot of this. When my mom and dad announced they were separating, as it's portrayed in The Fablemans, my dad fell on the sword. but I didn't know there was a sword to fall on. I simply took him at his word, and he said it was my idea to separate, and I lived with that, and I blamed my dad for years. Then the quote from this article, and I'll link it down below, says the movie reveals a secret about that Spielberg had been keeping until now, that when he was 16, he discovered his mother's affair with his dad's best friend, and that it was a secret that we shared for most of our lives. The interviewer still asks, your father did not know for most of his life that you knew? And Steven says, no, I never had that conversation with my dad. Interviewer says, but that's a burden on a young kid. That's a burden on you. And she let you carry that? Spielberg says, it's not that she let me carry it. It's something that I felt I could bury. And in a way, making this movie made me realize that I had been carrying the burden all these years, and I had to exercise it from my own heart and soul. And once it was out of my system, I was able to regret I hadn't shared that with my dad. Jesus. Sorry, guys. I think it's going to be like this the whole time. Love crying on the internet. Hi, everyone from high school. If you're watching this, your bullying was accurate. I am a fucking mess sometimes. So casting for Sammy Fableman, they auditioned over 2,000 people, and then Gabriel LaBelle got the part for the older version of Sammy. He also plays Lorne Michaels in Saturday Night, so he's now done some pretty iconic characters. And then Mateo Zoran Francis D. Ford plays young Spielberg, or Sammy Fableman. That's who he's representing. Mitzi Fableman, Sammy's mom, is played by Michelle Williams, who was Spielberg's first choice. It seems like he got his first choice for everybody, but of course it's Spielberg. Bert Fableman was played by Paul Dano, so if you don't know him, he's the teenage son from Little Miss Sunshine. Benny is played by Seth Rogen. Natalie Fableman is played by Keely Karsten for the older version, and Alina Brace for the young. Regina Fableman is played by Julia Butter for older, and Bertie Boria for young. Boris Podgorny, with this as the uncle, is played by Judd Hirsch. Lisa Fableman is played by Sophia Coppera. Bert's mom is played by Jeannie Berlin. Mitzi's mom is played by Robin Bartlett. And John Ford is played by the iconic director David Lynch, who actually didn't want to do this, but he was harassed by Laura Dern, who said you have to. So the filming was a 59-day shoot starting in 2021. It was shot largely on sound stages, except for the Malibu beach for the ditch day scenes. Sets were constructed from drawings that Spielberg had done from memory of his childhood homes, and sets were decorated based on the home footage of for reference. So Spielberg showed the cast his personal home movies, and this is a quote from Paul Dano. It was overwhelming, and it was sort of a heavy cloak to bear because there were someone who was having a big experience every day, revisiting and reworking this part of their life. For somebody like Steven to share that much of himself with us, with the audience too, it was really a profound experience. So Sammy's films are actually reshoots directly of Spielberg's home movies, and they taught Gabriel to use the camera so that they could use some of the shots when he's doing the direction as well. Spielberg was reported by multiple people, including himself, to be extremely emotional on set, crying frequently, and particularly on scenes that were not overly dramatized, but were often like word for word. So this film did not do well at the box office. It made $45.6 million on a $40 million budget, but reviews were universal. Rotten Tomatoes has a score of 92%. Letterboxd has a score of 4. I gave it 5 stars. Like I said, it made it in my top 4. My quote being, "This movie is a dream you'll never forget," which is a line from Mitzi Fableman. Variety's Peter DeBurrage says, from the first movie he saw to the memories of meeting filmmaker John Ford on the Paramount lot, this endearing, broadly appealing account of Spielberg smitten by the medium, and why the prodigy nearly abandoned picture making before his career even started, holds the keys to so much of this master's filmography. Matt Zoller Seats from RobertJEbert.com said, but this is not just a movie about somebody who's already good at something and gets even better at it. It's about the difficulty of marriage, parenting, and being somebody's child. It's also about the miracle of talent. So this film was nominated for many Academy Awards. For Best Picture, it was nominated against Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Tar, Top Gun, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. I hate that they're doing 10 now. They should do 5. Best Director was Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Marty Donna? Sorry, I've never said some of these out loud. Todd Field for Tar, and Ruben Oslin for Triangle of Sadness. Best Actress, Michelle Williams was nominated against Michelle Yeoh, Anna de Armas, Andrea Riseborough. Best Supporting Actor, Judd Hirsch was nominated against Ke Huy Quan for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keogh, and Brian Tyree Henry. Best Original Screenplay nominated against Everything Everywhere All at Once, against the Banshees, Tar, and Triangle of Sadness. Best Original Score against Babylon, Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and All Quiet on the Western Front. Production design for All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar, Babylon, and Elvis. It lost everything. Unfortunately, it lost Best Picture to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I don't think it should have. I think it should have won. Best Director is like Highway Robbery that he didn't win. For Everything Everywhere All at Once was the one that won, which kind of swept its Oscars. Michelle Yeoh beat Michelle Williams, which I can kind of take or leave that one. That's okay. Judd Hirsch lost to Ke Huy Quan, which I kind of agree with. To be honest, that's okay. Best Original Screenplay lost to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I don't agree with. Best Original Score lost to All Quiet on the Western Front. I don't agree with this either. There's so much use of piano done by Mitzi Fableman herself that's woven right into the story that I just found to be so breathtaking. And it lost production design to All Quiet on the Western Front, which again I don't believe, because the production design is incredible, having based it from Steven Spielberg and his sister's actual memories, which is crazy. Okay, so let's get into the plot. And you guys already can tell from this that I am going to be bawling my eyes out. So the film opens up in 1952. We're in New Jersey with Mitzi and Bert Fableman, and they have their young son, Sammy. They're standing in line to see a film. It's Sammy's first film. He doesn't really have a concept of what movies are, and it's the greatest show on earth. His parents are kind of giving him a pep talk, and this is shot at sort of a lower angle, so we don't really see the parents until they crouch down to Sammy's level. And this is where Mitzi says that movies are dreams you'll never forget. His father takes a very analytical approach, which is, we start to see the divide in their characters right away, which is he explains how they work. So there's 24 frames per second, and that's how we get the kind of illusion that it's motion capture. So we sit down, and there's a train scene that we see, and Sammy has got like they cast the cutest kid for this, just the biggest saucer eyes as there's this train crash, and then cut to the car ride home, and Sammy is too stunned to speak, and his parents are like, yeah, we knew this was too early. So then we cut to, and Sammy has nightmares about it, and because of this though, he wants a model train for Hanukkah. So then we see Hanukkah. He unwraps a piece of the train every night of Hanukkah. We then cut to a scene where he shows his family how it works. They're sitting in front of it, and both his grandmothers are there. We have Bert's mom, who is a real piece of work, and we have Mitzi's mom, who is quite loving. And you can see this is where we see some of those cinematic shots from the point of view of Sammy. So when he's sitting and he's setting up the train, we see through his vision, like a very cinematic shot of it, rather than just, showing like sort of from a higher level. It's almost like we're in a movie through Sammy's eyes, which I thought was brilliant. Sammy then, in the middle of the night one night, is crashing the train, and his father gets quite upset and lectures him about caring for the train, but he says he needs to crash it. And his mother, who understands him a lot better, understands that it's like a catharsis thing, that he needs to crash it so he can get a hold of the chaos. But his father doesn't get it. So again, we're seeing this like analytical versus creativity split. So Mitzi develops this idea that she's gonna let Sammy film a crash on the home movie camera, and then he can watch it over and over again so he doesn't have to break his train. And so then we cut to a scene. There's a dinner with the whole family, and we see Mitzi's got this really weird quirk of she has everything spread, like they eat on paper plates, paper cups, plastic forks, and then at the end of it, they throw everything in the middle and they scoop up the plastic tablecloth and throw everything away. She doesn't do dishes or anything like that. And so this is like a little like comment on like, this is not Mitzi's dream. This isn't the life she wanted. And she refuses to buckle to some sort of domestic housewife character type, I guess. So at the scene are Bert's mom, who's clearly judging Mitzi for this out loud and then with her eyes. And then Benny, who is the father's best friend, and also he works with Benny. or works with Bert is there, and he's sort of like the fun uncle. He's they comment on how he's there all the time. Bert's trying to explain something about his job, and Benny's kind of able to translate it to Mitzi, because Mitzi doesn't quite understand, and Benny's sort of their go-between. So there's this kind of odd dynamic that we see Bert's mom clock. So after this, Sammy sneaks away to watch his movie in his closet, which is sort of where he does this. And then later he shows Mitzi, and Mitzi sees that Sammy didn't just film the plane crash. Like, Sammy reshot the scene from the movie to really capture it, and he shot it over and over again. And she is impressed. Like, you can just see stars in her eyes. Like, she's so proud of her son. We then see Sammy begin to film regularly. That often involves his sisters, which I loved this scene. So there's a scene where they're using ketchup to try and make fake blood for a dentist scene, and he's using props. And there's a scene where they wrap themselves in all the toilet paper in the house to make mummies. It's really, really cute and just so sweet. And it just like captures not only like experimental filmmaking, but just siblings in general, like the trouble you get into all together. Like, I come from a family of 4 too, and like we would get up to mischief, and I loved seeing that. Bert is then offered a job in Phoenix, where he's going to move. This is a year later. They then have another sibling, and he sits the family down, and the kids are like, well, what about Uncle Benny? And Bert sort of says, well, Uncle Benny will be here, and he can work his way up, and da 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 da. And Mitzi is like, but he's your best friend. And you can see she's clearly like distraught. And then they get into this big fight, and as they're fighting, this tornado comes, and the kids drag her outside to look at it. And she, like, this is where you can see Mitzi. I don't know if maybe she struggles with a little bit of bipolar. Like, there's some manic energy to Mitzi that isn't totally explored in terms of like defining it, but just based on symptoms, it's like there's definitely some high highs and some low lows. So the kids drag her outside, and she says, come on, I'll take you closer. So she hands the baby to Bert, scoops up the 3 kids, and takes off down the block, driving towards this tornado, which is wild. They get towards it. There's kind of, you're seeing the buildings, like power lines are kind of falling, and she has to stop the car suddenly because a bunch of shopping carts race by. And they race by in a very like slightly sped up cinematic way, which I just thought was a nice touch, because we're seeing all this through Sammy. And she just breaks down and she says, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. We then cut to the family driving in the car, and we see Sammy, he's filming. And I love this because we see it through the point of view of the camera of the home movie. So his sisters are making faces. One of his sisters leans in and fogs up the glass, so you can see him like grab her shirt and wipe it. The father and the mother are smiling, and then we see Benny lean into the frame. So he has come with them, Mitzi one. And then my favorite shot of the film, well, one of them, there's 2 that I love. The last shot of the film too is good. So Sammy, when they get to the new house, says, stop, I want to film us coming in. And so he films the camera, like he films the car driving into the driveway, and he goes up and he says, stop. And then that's a cut transition to him saying the same thing, where he says the same thing as the older version, because he's filming his friends in the Boy Scouts. So he's continued to work on this throughout the thing. And we can see Sammy's differences in his creativity from his friends, not only shooting it, but there's a great scene in the movie theater where they're trying to talk during the movie, and they're teasing him a bit, but he keeps moving forward. And then you see like saucers in his eyes, because he's trying to really watch this film. And this is a John Ford movie that he's going to go see with Jimmy Stewart. So it's very interesting, and it's something I felt a lot growing up, and then now still. I love to go to movies by myself. I don't like bringing people. I want to be in the magic of the film. I hate watching movies with people, even at home, where they talk. Like, I will shush in the theater, and I will shush if you're watching a movie with me in real life. Don't fucking talk to me. I'm in the zone. Like, I'm in the world. And to see Sammy do that was amazing. And just like, I felt so seen. So we see him filming some scenes. He's filming like a little Western afterwards. We see his family's involved in it, which is really cool, helping him. And he's reviewing the film afterwards, and we see him hand editing. And he can't make these, like, there's like gunslinging. I don't know if that's what we'll call it, but we'll call it gunslinging. And he can't quite make it look authentic. And so he's quite frustrated. So he takes a pause on that. We then see a scene of Mitzi rehearsing a piano piece that she's going to play for the family. And it's clear that Mitzi, like, this was Mitzi's dream to be a concert pianist. And she's like incredible, next worldly. However, she's playing, and they can hear her fingernails tap on the piano. So after she finishes, they tell her she has to cut her nails. And Benny's there, of course. And so there's this moment, I don't know if you've seen the Friends episode, the one where they're at the beach. And Ross and Rachel are broken up, but they're like flirting, and Rachel's trying to race around and paint Ross's nails. It's very similar. Like, it's very, very flirty. Benny chases around, they cut the nails. Anyway, but during this process, she steps on her sheet music and it pokes through with her heel because this is America. And I've heard you guys wear shoes in the house. And I've seen it on film. That does not happen here. I don't think there's anybody in I live in Canada. None of us are wearing shoes in the house. If you wore shoes in someone's house, like, the town would know. Like, we'd be like, oh my God, they are shoe wearers in the house. Like, that would be scandalous. Anyway, so she pokes her heel through it. And Sammy picks it up and sees the light and realizes how he's going to make those gunslinging look effective. So then we see a scene of him screening the film, and he's actually poked holes through the film, each and every individual frame, so that the light flashes through, so it looks like something's coming out of the gun. After this, he tries to talk to his dad about buying new editing equipment, and his father's not a bad guy, for sure. Like, he's not portrayed that way, and I think Paul Dano does a really good balance of being like, his father is just trying to help steer Sammy into the direction of the safe engineering life that he has. He knows that his son's very dedicated, he knows his son's very smart, but he sees film and film creativity as like a hobby and something that is not worth pursuing. So he's like, I'm not going to spend the money on the hobby. I'm going to spend something. You're going to dedicate your life. It needs to be something real and useful, not imaginary. We then cut to a family camping trip that also includes Benny, and Sammy's taking footage of the vacation. And we see the further divide. The father is trying to teach the girls how to start a fire and is being like more analytical, very like focused on the seriousness of camping, like just like he's just a more serious guy. And like, it's not portrayed as a bad thing. It's just portrayed as him being different, where the mother and Benny are like goofing around and like climbing a tree and having fun. We see them singing around the campfire, Benny and the mom. And then later, Benny and Bert get into a bit of an argument because Bert's been offered this new job and Benny feels like he's going to be left behind again. Bert is going to be promoted, and Mitzi, who I think's had something to drink, comes out of the tent and she doesn't want to go. She says her heart's in Phoenix, and she begins dancing the ballet. This is why I think she's drunk. I can't remember. It was such a quick shot in the movie, and I take notes while I watch, so I might have been looking down. And Sammy's trying to film it, but he says there's not enough light, and Benny says, oh, hang on a second, and he goes and he turns the lights on in his car, and so she's backlit as she's dancing, which makes her gown see-through. Her daughters are mortified. Sammy doesn't seem to care because it's cinematically working. And Benny and Bert have the same loving look of wonderment on their eyes. They're both so clearly in love with Mitzi. Mitzi's mom in the next scene then dies, and Mitzi is absolutely distraught. This is like the most incredible sound I think I've ever heard an actor make on screen. And if you've ever been around grief, there's a sound that people make upon the discovery of a death of a family member or a friend. It's like haunting, it's guttural, and she does it like, holy shit. It's so real. It's just like, I instantly just bawled, because if you've ever been around grief, like, you know that sound and it just echoes through your bones. It was so great. And so Bert talks to Sammy and he says, look, like, your mom's so depressed. Like, you need to edit the vacation film to like the camping trip film to cheer her up. Sammy doesn't want to do this because he's got this shoot planned. He wants to do this war thing. And Bert says, no, like, you're not doing this tomorrow. You need to do this for your mom. And he says, look, like, your hobby doesn't matter. Like, you need to do this. And again, dismissing it. Mitzi then gets, quote unquote, a phone call in the middle of the night from her mother, which is like a dream. But she really does pick up the phone saying that somebody's coming and not to let him in the house. But I don't know. I don't know how many of you are into the supernatural spookiness. As much as it's portrayed as a phone call, like, I do believe that like loved ones do try to contact you. I have had several ghost experiences in my life, some hauntings from some people that I know and love that have died that come and visit me. So I don't think that it was like a phone call, and I don't know what they're getting at, or I'm just reading too much into it. But that's what happened. The next morning, the Fablemans receive a visit from Mitzi's uncle, her mother's brother, Uncle Boris, who is in film as a lion tamer and just sort of worked on sets. So we see a dinner scene, which is awesome. Like Sammy sort of discovers this and he's like asking him questions. And we see this is the first time Sammy's kind of like out of his shell and like so lit up. Like you just, when somebody's so passionate about something, asking him questions. So later, because Uncle Boris is staying in Sammy's room, they have a discussion about film and filmmaking. And Boris talks about his mother. And he says, you need to do this for your mom, and you need to understand that your mom was not destined to do this. Like your mom was meant to be a concert pianist. Your mom has this spark, this love of art, and she loves you guys, but that's where her heart belongs. And you are the same. You're the same. You love your family, but filmmaking is your true love. And Sammy tries to deny this about his mother, but his uncle, and he says this quote, which I love: family, art, it will tear you in two. Hear your mother play. And in the background, Mitzi's playing. She could have been great. He then goes on to say, art will give you crowns in heaven and laurels on earth, but it also will tear your heart out and leave you lonely. You'll be a shanda for your loved ones, an exile in the desert, a gypsy. Art is no game. Art is as dangerous as a lion's mouth, and it'll bite your head off. And I think anybody who's creative understands that there's this like expression where you have to like extract the art from yourself, and it can be really painful, and the feeling of needing to do that can sometimes really cloud your responsibilities in life. And this love for that, often you feel connected to these characters or things like that more than the people in your life. You feel more understood for me, I felt more understood watching film than I ever have by another person in my entire life. I am more connected to the movies that feel like friendship than I am to anything. And I love my friends. I love my family. I do anything for them. But there is this part of me where my heart belongs in this world that doesn't exist. And I think Uncle Boris does a really great job of capturing that. So then Uncle Boris leaves and Sammy begins to edit the vacation footage in his closet, which is an ongoing thing where he does this. And he is editing and he's cutting together, and he sees little evidence of his mom and Benny having an affair. He sees them holding hands. He sees a cheek kiss. There's a background scene where she's leaning on Benny. And this is all done while Mitzi is playing the piano, like this sort of heartbroken ballad that like begins to pick up, which that's why I love the score in this film so much. Like it just was incredible. And so he's seeing all these playful interactions and he's horrified. So he realizes what is happening, and it's just this moment of catharsis. And Sammy then shows a version of the camping trip to his family and Benny, but he's cut all of that out. And his mom tries to thank him, and this is where Sammy like shuts down and he just starts to brush her off. And we see this continually for a few weeks of him being like really cutting his mom off and being quite rude, and same with Benny. We then jump to a scene of Sammy shooting a war movie, and there's a guy where he's trying to give direction to, and he says, you want me to act and stuff? And then Sammy gives this like big bit of direction where you can tell that he's like unraveling his sort of feelings and trying to process this of his parents. And he gets emotional and tears up. And then we cut to the scene where he's trying to shoot this kid, and this kid is able to bring tears based on what Sammy has said to him. We then cut to a scene of the screening of it, and afterwards Sammy's congratulated by his mom and Benny, and he is super rude to both of them. And then he sees that Mitzi gets driven home by Benny, and he goes home with his father. We then cut to a scene at the kitchen table. Sammy's getting ready to do some lifeguarding stuff, I believe, for the Boy Scouts, and he's going over a test with his sisters. And him and Mitzi get into an argument, and they get into a fight, and he basically says, I wish you weren't my mother. And in like an absolute blind rage, she goes to slap him across the face, and he turns and she hits him as hard as she can in his back, so much that it leaves a red mark on his back. And you just see her face horrified and the sister's face horrified, and this look of betrayal from Sammy, who until this, I believe, from his mother, felt very seen and very understood until this whole affair came up. And so this look of betrayal from both like now a physical violence standpoint and emotionally, and like based upon the structure systems of his family, he runs into his room and Mitzi follows him, and he pulls her into the closet and he plays the tape, and she watches it, and we don't actually see what Mitzi's seeing. We just see Mitzi's reaction, and she sort of crawls out of the closet, collapses crying. And he gets on the floor and hugs her and promises to keep her secret. And this is true. All of this stuff is true. This is like exactly how it happened for Spielberg. And he kept the secret for his mom. until she died. So then we see Bert receives another promotion and they move, but Benny stays behind in Phoenix. And Sammy is so disillusioned with filmmaking because of what he's found. He goes to sell his camera. Benny is there, who's ordered a new camera for Sammy, and he tries to give it to him, and Sammy won't take it. Like, very clearly, Mitzi has told Benny about what Sammy knows, and Benny's trying to give it to him, and Sammy won't take it. Benny says, think whatever bad things you want about me, kiddo, but you stop making movies and it'll break your mother's heart, and you will break her heart, and I mean it. She doesn't deserve that, not from anybody. And Sammy refuses to use it unless he pays Benny for it, which he does, but Benny slips the money back into Sammy's pocket and they say goodbye. Sammy still vows to never use the camera. We then see them driving out to California, and I believe it's shot with old school driving because it very much looks like a film, like for part of it, where it's just like a screen in the background and Bert's kind of doing this. I don't know. I couldn't find that specifically, but that's how it looked to me. Bert then tells us like a story. He's like, oh, I had a weird dream that I like punched Benny in the face. And Mitzi has to pull over and she gets out and she's bawling and Sammy follows her. And she tells him that there's never anything physical between her and Benny. And Sammy's like I didn't think so. And she asks if she thinks that the father knows, which is a lot of pressure to put on your kid, holy shit, who's like 16. And she says, I've always wanted to tell your father, but I can't hurt him and that he's a good man. The sisters and Sammy have to go to a school, and Sammy becomes a target for bullying and based largely on anti-Semitism by two students named Logan and Chad. Logan is kind of more of a bystander, but Chad is like ruthless, threatening him physical violence, knock his teeth out. Mitzi then also gets a monkey and calls it Benny. She's very depressed, and Bert says she's acting like somebody's dying. They overhear them talking about it, discussing Benny, and Mitzi says, he was never your friend, but you knew he was mine. We then cut to a scene where Sammy sees Logan, one of the bullies, making it with a girl that in the stairwell that's not his girlfriend. He is then kind of cornered by the bullies later, where he drops this information in front of the girlfriend, and then he gets beaten up quite badly. We cut then to a scene at home where Sammy is kind of raging about all this, and he blames Bert for moving them, and he says, you're just running away from Phoenix. Like, you're doing this. Like, you don't care about what's happening. You don't care about how mom feels. You don't care about how I feel. And Bert says, if you have something you want to tell me, like, just tell me. So it kind of seems as though Bert is aware that Sammy knows about this emotional affair. Then cut to a scene where Sammy is sitting with the girlfriend and her friend, basically trying to say that it was a lie because he's been threatened by the bullies. And the girlfriend is like, no, it wasn't a lie. Like, I know. And her friend is this like devout Christian who finds out that Sammy's Jewish, and then wants him to come over and pray with her. And there's this incredibly cringy prayer scene where, oh my God, it was like watching Scott's Tots at the office. Like, I was just like dying. And like, I was like looking at my husband. I'm like, I have to turn this off. Like, I want to die. Anyway, so he gets this super Christian girlfriend and they like to make out behind the bleachers. She then comes over to dinner with the Fablemans and they are talking. The Fablemans get in this kind of fight because they're encouraging Sammy. Well, Mitzi's encouraging Sammy to film Ditch Day, and Bert is basically like, no, like, it's fine. You don't need to do that. And they get into a big fight in front of everybody, and Sammy's girlfriend, Monica, kind of half-heartedly mentions that her father has this, like, very exciting, expensive camera, and Sammy agrees to do it. We have this lovely scene of Sammy shooting Ditch Day, this kind of one last happy thing. They move into this great big new house, and then Mitzi and Bert announce their divorce. So Sammy, she admits, Sammy's dad, Bert, says that it was his idea to get divorced. Mitzi admits the affair, and then because she's going to go move back to be with Benny. And there's this great shot where Sammy looks in the mirror and he's looking at the scene very cinematically, and he looks in the mirror and then he sees like an image of himself that isn't what's happening, but him filming the scene. And I think this is just a nod to Spielberg shooting the scene later in life. Oh my God, I need to stop crying. Guys, this movie hit so hard. This is so embarrassing. These are going on the internet. This is so embarrassing. There's they cut to prom, and Sammy tells his girlfriend he loves her and he wants her to come with him to Hollywood after high school. And she's like, no, I'm not throwing away my whole life. I'm going to Texas to go to university. And she breaks up with him. So he's like distraught. They then show the Ditch Day film, and Sammy's edited to make Logan look like this kind of hero. And then this humiliating shots of Chad where he's getting rejected by girls, hit with extra waves, fucking up at volleyball. Like, it makes him look terrible. Sammy then, after this, is kind of runs out into the hallway because he's really upset about Monica breaking up with him. Logan then goes to find him and is like, why did you portray me positively when all I've done is bully you? So here's some quotes. Am I supposed to feel bad now about all the shit we did to you? Sammy says, do you feel bad about it? Logan says, that's none of your goddamn business. Sammy says, because you should feel about it. Logan says, all right, that's why you did it. You wanted to make me feel like crap. And Sammy said, I wanted you to be nice to me for 5 minutes. Or did I make him, or to make my movie better? I don't know why. You're the biggest jerk I've ever met in my whole life. I have a monkey at home that's smarter than you, you dumb anti-Semitic asshole. I made you look like you could fly. And essentially, this makes like Logan cry because he's like, you portrayed me in this person that I can never be. Chad then finds them and tries to attack Sammy, and Logan immediately just punches Chad in the face, knocking him to the ground. And Chad runs away, and Logan threatens Sammy to never tell anyone. And I love this dialogue. After Logan is like kind of saying, you can't tell anyone, he's pacing back and forth, pacing back and forth. Sammy says, is something about to happen? Logan says, you like to live dangerously, Fableman. Sammy says, no, I don't. I really, really don't. Logan says, yes, you do, but you don't tell anybody about me getting upset. That would be a mistake. Our secret, okay? Sammy says, definitely. Unless I make a movie about it, which I'm never, ever going to do. Which I love, because of course this is a movie about it. Sammy that gets home from prom tells his mother about the disaster of him breaking up with, or Monica breaking up with him. And she talks to him about the slap. And basically it's like, before I move back to Arizona, before I move back to Phoenix, I need to know that you forgive me for the slap. And he does. And she said, I'm doing this thing, and I don't know if it's the right thing, but it's a life or death thing for me, and I'm sorry. But everybody's going to have to hang on for dear life, and somehow we will survive this, all of us. Even your father, who I adore with all my heart. He deserves so much better than what I'm doing, but Benny needs me, and I need him. So much so that without him, I'm turning into someone I don't know, and that none of you will know anymore. I'm just this hateful person who did that terrible thing to your back. And yes, this is the most selfish thing I've ever done, but I gotta do this now, Sammy. You gotta do what your heart says you have to, because you don't owe anyone your life, not even me. And I think this is sort of the crux of the movie, where although this is where her heart is, and Mitzi leads with her heart. And this movie does such a good job of not blaming Mitzi or Bert for the divorce, but just really objectively portrayed that marriage is like so complicated. And oftentimes nobody's right and nobody's wrong. It's just this like, it can be just this unfortunate circumstance. Like sometimes you just don't marry the right person. Especially at this time where women just got married in the 50s. And, this is so sad of seeing this woman who should have been something great having gotten stuck standing behind an oven, and then somebody finally sees her for her, but it's not her husband. We then cut to the following year. Sammy's living with his father. He gets a letter with photos from his mom. His dad looks at them, and there's Benny and his mom in the background, and he just looks so hurt. And Sammy and Bert have this conversation about Sammy's passion, and Bert finally understands, and he says, you got to do what you got to do, and just like put all of your heart into it. Sammy then receives a letter from CBS to work at a show called Hogan's Heroes. When he goes to interview with the guy, he's like, well, you want to be in filmmaking. This isn't for you. Go meet with the director across the hall. And Sammy, sitting in the office, realizes that the director is John Ford. So he's done, for those of you who don't know, he did Stagecoach, The Grapes of Wrath, and The Searchers. I think I think all three of those are on the AFI's top 100 movies of all time. And then the director comes through, which is John Ford, but that's actually portrayed by David Lynch, as I mentioned before. And Gabriel was not told that it was David Lynch. So his reaction and nervousness is like actually reacting to that character or that director, David Lynch, being like, holy shit, I'm standing in the presence of greatness here. So Ford is this like kind of gruff guy, and he just immediately starts interrogating Sammy like instantly. So I want to read this last bit because I love it. I'm just going to read it in full. Ford says, they tell me you want to be a picture maker. Sammy, yes, I do. John Ford, why? This business will rip you apart. Sammy, well, Mr. Ford, Ford says, so what do you know about art, kid? Sammy says, I love your movie so much. Ford, no art. See the paintings over there? Sammy, yeah, I mean, I do see them. John Ford, walk over to it. Well, what do you see? Describe it. Sammy, oh, okay, well, there's two guys and they're on horseback and they're looking for something, so maybe they're scouting. John says, no, 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 the horizon. Sammy, the horizon. John, where is it? Sammy, it's at the bottom. John, that's right. John, walk over to this painting. Well, right. Oh, Sammy says, right, okay, there's 5 cowboys. John, no, 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 the goddamn horizon. Sammy, it's up there. John Ford says, where? And Sammy says, at the top of the painting. John, all right, get over here. Now, remember this. When the horizon's at the bottom, it's interesting. When the horizon's at the top, it's interesting. When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit. Now, good luck to you and get the fuck out of my office. Sammy kind of races out and John Ford sort of smiles to himself and Sammy peeks his head back in and says, thank you. And John Ford says, my pleasure. And then we cut to a scene of Sammy, like, basically dancing out of the lot. And we see a photo of him, or a picture of him like walking into the horizon, and then Spielberg adjusts the shot so that it's interesting. And it's my second favorite shot of the movie. So that's the Fablemans, guys. Thanks for being with me this week and being with me for my summer of Spielberg. Watching me cry on the internet. It's been a long time, guys, and it's the first time I've done it on video. Last time I think it was just audio. So this is a new thing, watching me cry. Hopefully I'll be okay for the remainder of the episodes. I think I'm not going to cry again until we revisit It's a Wonderful Life again. So thanks so much for joining me and happy Sunday.